away with route numbers, which are always confusing. What's the 48? What's the 40? Where does that go? It's the hop, the skip, the jump, the bound, the dash, the bolt. Based on their distance, based on their route, they now have distinct identities. And they chose a graphic scheme and a color scheme, a livery, to reinforce that identity. Now, what used to be a social service, 26% of every resident in Boulder rides the bus every day. It was a phenomenal increase in ridership. Boulder buses do a lot of things very, very well. In the inside, what you'll see is that the seats face towards one another, as opposed to the theater-style seating where you're rewarded with the back of somebody's head. And this does a couple of things. One, it facilitates conversations. So if you are taking the bus with somebody or a group of people, you can actually continue your conversation. It also helps with policing. And this is something about riding the bus that makes people anxious and nervous. What's going on behind me, 5 rows back? I don't know. No one's paying attention. But with everyone facing one another, it's the same principle, eyes on the street. Everyone's looking at each other. The amount of delinquent behavior is drastically reduced. And, very, very simple, very ingenious, the public said, how come we just can't have music maybe on the bus? He said, okay, XM radio installed. What I begin to understand in looking at this is when I look at a public space, whether it's a park, a downtown plaza, a streetscape, I have to deconstruct that space and find out what are the essential design characteristics that I have to focus on to enrich the experience for the user. And you could do the same exact thing with transit circulators. And I found that there's just a few, 9. If you pay attention to each of these design considerations, you can drastically change the way a transit circulator looks and feels for the customer. And I'll go over some of these real quickly. Route. Here we have the St. Charles streetcar again. Considered the most beautiful transportation artery in the country. But you don't necessarily have to have big, huge mature trees and a grassy median to make the route attractive. You have to understand that bus riders, train riders, are first and foremost pedestrians. They have to walk some distance to a train stop, some distance to the bus stop. They have to wait, they have to get on the bus, and then walk again when they get to their destination. So we have to look at the entire route. What is that route? What are those streets like when you're walking to the bus? What's it like to wait for the bus for 15 minutes? What's it like to wait for the bus for 30 minutes? What's it like on the other end when you alight from the bus? That's all part of the route. What do you see in the bus or the train as you're going down the street? Operation. Nobody likes the stupid, smelly buses, if you're a Junie B. Jones fan. The best buses you'll find are the ones that are operated by electricity. Silent, clean for the eco-conscious, but more for the direct experience, silent. It's amazing what it's like not to have to smell diesel exhaust or hear the loud rumblings of a diesel engine, how much more pleasant a bus ride can be. Some of our most well-appointed transit vehicles look almost like taverns or old pubs, like this Tampa streetcar. Transparency, here's that bus again. Transparency is the ability to see into the transit vehicle and outside with minimal obstructions. And this has a huge effect on whether people want to take a bus or not. Because anytime someone is entering an unknown social situation, they want to be able to see what's going on in that space, in that room, before they get to that situation. Bus wraps like this completely obliterate transparency. You have no idea what you're walking into until you've actually made the decision to step on board the bus. And it also reduces the experience, the colors, and the vivacity of the surrounding landscape. Beautiful landscape because the window's open. Otherwise, the heavily tinted windows treats passengers with this view. And then here's an example of a bus where the wrap only goes partway up. Yes, the wraps are translucent, I would say. There is some visual permeability. I can read this. I can't read this down here. If I'm a new transit rider and I'm trying to get to a business or a store or just find the name of a street and I can't read what's going on outside the window, I'm nervous and I'm anxious, and that's enough to shoo people away from transit. The best transparency, like this shuttle in downtown Santa Barbara, provides an intimate connection between passenger and pedestrian. And that is compelling, and that does entice people to try transit. Seating is also very, very important. And the one thing that we so often get wrong in transit vehicles, the best transit vehicles, I use this example of the Seattle monorail, not because it's necessarily a great example of public transit, because it's more tourist, but because it's one of the best examples of providing people, passengers, a choice in seating. Just like with your home, just like with your office, just like in school, it's nice to be able to have options on where to sit and how to sit. These seats provide people who want to face forward, you can face to the side, you can ride backwards, you can have conversations with one other person, conversations with 4 people. You might even be lucky enough to ride shotgun with the transit operator. And that is always the best seat in the house. And then also seating shouldn't ignore the fact that on crowded, very successful transit lines, there's going to be people who stand. Reward the people who stand with ample space and tall windows so they get to see the passing scene just like someone sitting next to them. Color. Color adds fancy and can provide distinction to transit. You know, at one time in this country, all the streetcars were painted a unique color, a unique livery for the city that they were in. So the Los Angeles streetcar was painted orange and yellow, very fitting for that sun-drenched city. Brooklyn was green and silver, Kansas City was cream and black, Philadelphia was maroon and cream. It was the colors, the unique liveries. All the streetcars were the same, but it was the colors that gave each transit in every city some distinction. And color can also reinforce the landscape of which the community is part of. So in Santa Barbara, the gleaming white and the sea green trim, of course, is wholly congruent with this beachside community. And the Copper shuttle buses in downtown Phoenix for Copper Square reinforces that identity. Lighting is probably the single most important factor once the sun goes down. It could be the fluorescent lights that we typically see in buses. Sometimes they're working, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're working, but they're flickering. Or they could be warm glows of incandescent light with real glass refractors, something you don't expect to see in public transit, something that reminds you of home or some of our best public gathering spots. Headway is often considered, that's the frequency that the transit vehicles come. And that's often considered the most important criterion for whether a transit experience is frustrating or at least tolerable and convenient. And there's usually 3 considerations for that. One is to provide more vehicles. Just buy more buses, buy more streetcars. The other one is labor costs, and that's actually the most pervasive reason why we can't increase frequency. You have to hire more drivers. Very, very expensive. But there's also some minor design tweaks that you can do to increase the frequency of these buses so you're not having to wait. The goal is to try to get buses and trains to come every 15 minutes because that's about our threshold for tolerance. We don't need a schedule if we know every bus is coming at 15 minutes. If we just missed the last one, we know we only have to wait 15 minutes more. Much beyond that, and we start getting very impatient, and we'll probably find another way to get around. But with some simple design tweaks, like here's a proposal in Chicago to give buses their own dedicated lanes. That's a huge improvement in reducing delays. As soon as buses have to pull into and out of traffic or get stuck because someone double parked, there's going to be delays. And that happens all across the country. But other design tweaks like allowing passengers to pay for their fare ahead of time, whether a smartphone or a kiosk outside, so they're not fumbling for change, exact change, as they're trying to board. People who board the front. People who alight from the rear. So there's none of this lag time here. Reducing the distance between stops. I was on a bus ride this morning and the bus stopped every block and a half. And that's ridiculous. That really does slow down. Everyone should be able to walk 3 blocks or 4 blocks. It's better for us and it's better for everyone riding transit. In Copenhagen, they're using traffic signals, which we already have this technology in the United States. Smart traffic signals that recognize certain cars. We use them now when an ambulance or a fire truck is approaching, and then it changes to the green light so that they don't have to stop. Sometimes the green lights are lengthened to improve level of service, more traffic through the intersection. We can do the same thing for buses, and Copenhagen is using this so that if a bus is delayed or a bus is overcrowded and can't accept more passengers, they're given a green light, sometimes as long as 30 seconds to keep those buses moving to get the other buses through. And then if you have a unique landscape like you have in Tacoma, there's a great opportunity to create to create transit with some real distinction and character and a connection to place. I mean, this is, of course, amplified with the funiculars in Pittsburgh and the cable cars in San Francisco and the aerial trams in New York City and Portland. But thinking big, thinking long term, how are we getting people up and down these steep hills? It could be something functional, hopefully it is functional, but it could be something very fun too. A reason for visitors to come to take pictures. It's on the postcards. Dream big, think big. This is what they did in Charlotte, North Carolina. They wanted circulators that reflected life in the South. A bus and a tram. The front porch and the veranda. Very, very distinctive. Something to attract more riders, something postcard worthy in that community. But the ultimate goal is that transit shouldn't be something that's anxious for people. It should be something that, it shouldn't be something that you dread having to do right after you wake up or right after you get off work. At the very least, it should provide a place to relax and decompress. And if it can bring a smile to your face or some joy, even better. What I want to impress is that public transit is public space. Like the city streets, parks, town squares that I design, a lot of attention is paid to detail. If I add this tree, what's it going to do? If I add this bench and I put it here, here, or here, how's that going to impact the user experience? The same thing could happen with public transit. We can continue to have buses that look like this, or we can have transit circulators that begin to look more like your favorite bars or cafes. And sometimes public transit is, enriches both public space and provides good business opportunities. You know what? I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'll jump to this one. I want to shift gears real quick because I know there's probably a lot of bicycling enthusiasts here. And I want to talk about cycling. I know there's a couple of big issues that you guys are considering right now. The issue with getting people to bike is a little bit different than getting people to ride the bus. People already enjoy biking. We already know biking is fun. Nobody wakes up in the morning and looks forward to walking down to the bus and waiting for the bus. But we do enjoy biking. But very few Americans bike, either for commuting or just to take care of daily errands. So why is that? What is the issue here? Well, I typically like to just fall back on the very insightful advice of one of the greatest bicycling gurus of the world, Freddie Mercury. And Freddie Mercury summed it up with just one line in a song: I want to ride my bicycle, I want to ride it where I like. And that is the crux of the issue. Not being able to ride your bike where you want to. For some people, it's a bucket list item. Before I die, I want to ride my bike in London. He could have been Freddie Mercury reincarnated. As it turns out, almost all Americans feel the same way Freddie Mercury does. They want to ride their bikes, but they're concerned. They're concerned for their safety, even when bike lanes exist. Apparently, that 4 to 6 inch painted white stripe does nothing to assuage the concerns of the 60% of Americans who would like to ride their bikes on city streets. And here's why. Here's what I call the unbikeable bike lane, which you can find in every urban and suburban community across America. So what we have here is this bike lane, by the way, meets all federal engineering standards. This is exactly how a bike lane should look, right? Meets all the standards. What we have is 5 feet from the center line of the painted stripe to the face of the curb. But we don't really have 5 feet of width. We have an effective width, is what I call it. So first we have the catch basin, the drainage grates, 18 inches in most communities, right along the gutter. Of course, as bicyclists, we don't want to ride over these drainage grates. We also know that debris and trash collects in the gutter. So we shy away from that. Next we have this ridge where the asphalt meets the concrete gutter. No one bikes on that ridge. That's an accident waiting to happen. So you shy away from that ridge, about 8 inches on either side. 8 inches puts you right into the catch basin zone. So now you're riding more on this side. Nobody bikes on the white line itself. That's crazy. It's slippery and it puts you too close to passing traffic. So what you're left with in a 5-foot bike lane is 18 inches of effective width. And with the very real danger of biking next to vehicles like this, it's no wonder that Americans avoid bike lanes like the plague. So what do? Here's a newsflash for you. I saw this in the paper today, just now. Amazing. Females comprise half the population. Sorry, it's not as random as it appears. What's astounding is that, yes, and in the great cycling cities of Europe, like Amsterdam and Berlin and Copenhagen, 50% of all cycling trips are made by women, which makes sense since they comprise half the population. But in the United States, it's very different. We have the same gender distribution, same number of trips, but bicycle. Male cyclists outnumber female cyclists 3-1. Why is that? Scientific American found a solution. They said, if you want to get more cyclists on the road, you have to figure out what women want. And what do women want?